How exactly do you follow up a masterpiece? It's a question every artist will eventually face in their life. For the developers at Nintendo EAD, that was the question on everyone's mind following the release of Ocarina of Time. Saddled with a long development time and a new generation of consoles right around the corner, Nintendo put away any ideas there were of making a game of the same scope as Ocarina of Time. What followed was one of the most creative and explicitly different takes on the Legend of Zelda formula, helmed by the man who would become the godfather of the Legend of Zelda series. The Miyamoto era was officially over, and a new vision for the series from director Eiji Aonuma would push Zelda into the 21st century. This is the story of that revolutionary work. This is the story of The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. By the end of 1998, 3D gaming was the norm on consoles, and with it the need for longer and more expensive development cycles. The 5-year development cycle for Ocarina of Time proved fruitful, with critical and commercial praise for the game being unlike any other title for the Nintendo 64. But a 5-year development cycle was far too long for some to wait, especially with a new generation of home consoles right around the corner. By the end of the year, Nintendo EAD was already working with the assets of Ocarina of Time to craft a new Zelda adventure. Unveiled under the title Ura Zelda in the May 1999 issue of Famitsu magazine, the next entry in The Legend of Zelda was coming to the Nintendo 64 DD. Ura Zelda was revealed as a reworked version of Ocarina of Time, with rearranged dungeons to provide a more difficult challenge. This challenge mode was inspired by the original Zelda's Master Quest that allowed the player to tackle a harder version of the game, and was meant for those who had already finished the original adventure. The first look at Link's next adventure, however, wouldn't come until Space World 1999. Nintendo's annual event was held in August that year. Our first looks at the sequel to Ocarina of Time were shown, but it was under a new name. Zelda Gaiden, or Zelda Side Story for a rough English translation, was revealed to an eager Nintendo fanbase, with a full playable demo at the event. Early screenshots of the game made their way to American press outlets and spread across the early internet, drumming up hype for the 6th Zelda title. But wait, was it Zelda Gaiden or Ura Zelda? Later, clarifications from Miyamoto and Nintendo cleared up the confusion regarding all of the Zelda news of 1999. It was revealed that Ura Zelda and Zelda Gaiden were two separate projects being handled by Nintendo's EAD team. Ura Zelda was still a revamped version of Ocarina for the Nintendo 64 DD. Zelda Gaiden, by contrast, was planned for a cartridge release, with the title needing the Nintendo 64's 4MB expansion pack to run. The reveal of a full-fledged Zelda sequel was met with excitement from the community, and a planned release date of early 2000 in Japan had eager fans on the edge of their seats for Link's next journey. Within Nintendo, Zelda Gaiden was progressing smoothly. Shigeru Miyamoto had returned to the project as producer, but took a more hands-off approach with the project compared to previous Zelda entries. Miyamoto's other producer roles and the upcoming release of the Nintendo GameCube kept the legendary developer away from the project. Day-to-day leadership on the project was handled by the game's two directors, Eiji Aonuma and Yoshiaki Koizumi. Both returned to the Zelda team as directors, and wanted to take the next Zelda adventure in a completely different direction when compared to Ocarina of Time. A unique concept of a repeating 3-day sequence led the team's initial creative vision. Inspired by the experimental film Run Lola Run, Zelda Gaiden would repeat the same 3-day sequence, ending with a game over screen of the moon crashing down into the earth below. The 3-day sequence was chosen for a number of reasons. For one, it gave the team an opportunity to design a smaller game world, but one with deeper gameplay and more interactive elements when compared to Ocarina. The smaller scope also meant the game's file size wouldn't balloon to unappealing sizes. After all, the entire adventure needed to fit onto a single Nintendo 64 cartridge. Reusing the assets of Ocarina of Time and a smaller world design meant the team wouldn't have to spend nearly as much time on Zelda Gaiden as past projects, and this was needed. As part of his original pitch for Zelda Gaiden, Eiji Aonuma proposed making the game in roughly a 12-month timeline, and if the team couldn't complete the project, they would shelve it, and rejoin the Ura Zelda team working on the 64DD expansion. Past entries in the series featured the hookshot, shield, boomerang, among other items to help Link on their journey, but the next entry would introduce 24 different masks to the equation. 3 masks, based on the Deku, Goron, and Zora people, headlined the adventure, with Link using each of these masks to possess the form of their respective races and progress in the story. Deku Link could float over large gaps and shoot seeds. Goron Link could roll into a ball and possessed immense power. and Zora Link could swim underwater, uninhibited, and played a nasty fishbone guitar. Various other masks populated the game, ranging from situational story-related mask to the iconic and incredibly useful bunny hood. The 24th and final mask of the game, the Fierce Deity mask, quickly became a fan favorite, despite its limited use. To obtain the mask, the player has to unlock all other masks in the game. The boss battle only masks saw Link grow to the same size they were during the adult portions of Ocarina of Time. Striking white hair, hollow eyes, and a massive sword gave Fierce Deity Link an imposing form that would quickly destroy any and all bosses. It was a reward well worth its weight in gold. Zelda Gaiden was shaping up to be a very different take on the Zelda formula, and by the end of 1999, Zelda Gaiden was planned for release in Japan in spring 2000, with a North American launch following that holiday season. News on the next Zelda slowly trickled out in early 2000, but it wasn't until March that the next Zelda adventure received its full name for North America. Link's next adventure was titled The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. On April 27, 2000, The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask was released in Japan. Two versions of the game were available for purchase in the region, one that included the Nintendo 64's expansion pack and another that didn't. Critical reception was positive, with Famitsu awarding the game a 37 out of 40. Gamers were excited for Majora's Mask, and a total of over 300,000 copies of the game were sold during its first week of sales in Japan. With the Western release of Majora's Mask still roughly 6 months away, eager players took it upon themselves to import the game, despite many likely being unable to understand Japanese. The hype surrounding a new adventure in the Zelda universe was just too tantalizing for some. Majora's Mask was playable at E3 2000, where Nintendo opted to focus their presence at the show on the Game Boy Color and Nintendo 64. Later in the summer, Nintendo held their 7th Space World event, where Majora's Mask was shown once again, but was largely old news by this point. The dual announcements of the Game Boy Advance and the Nintendo GameCube, alongside their respective lineups, stole any and all thunder from the final few Nintendo 64 releases. On October 26, 2000, The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask arrived on American shores in a sleek gold cartridge. At launch, Nintendo only released one version of the game in the region, without an expansion pack. Majora's Mask was one of only 2 games to require the expansion pack to play. To play the latest of Link's adventures, players would have to purchase the expansion pack separately, or purchase a copy of Donkey Kong 64, which came bundled with the pack. Critical reception to the title was incredibly positive upon release. A wave of 9 and 10s washed over the game, with many comparing the game to its predecessor. Praise was given to Koji Kondo's soundtrack, the darker and more mature themes present in the game, and the strong visuals on Nintendo's aging hardware. The game's 3-day cycle was met with mixed opinions, however. Some praised the ever-looping 3-day cycle, saying it added an extra layer of depth to every area of the game. Others felt it was a bit too restrictive, with the entire 3-day cycle playing out in less than an hour. This made dungeons more tedious, as multiple run-throughs were often needed to avoid the strict time limit. A PAL release came a month later on November 17th, and the title saw similar critical and commercial success. It was the crown jewel in Nintendo's lineup for 2000, and quickly became a leading contender for several end-of-the-year awards. The most notable award came from the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences, where Ocarina of Time had stole the show only 2 years earlier. The game was nominated for multiple awards, including Game of the Year, and managed to take home 3. Best Action Game, Best Adventure Game, and the award for Outstanding Game Design. Majora's Mask was a very different type of Zelda adventure from its opening moments. Rather than traveling across Hyrule to save Princess Zelda as the last 4 console entries had done, Majora's Mask sees a young Link transported to the mysterious land of Termina. Taking place just a few months after the events of Ocarina of Time, Link is ambushed by the mysterious Skull Kid in a forest. Using 2 fairies, Skull Kid scares Epona, knocking Link off the horse. Skull Kid goes through Link's belongings, stealing the Ocarina of Time from the previous game. Skull Kid steals Epona, riding off into the darkness of the forest. Link gives chase, but is transported to Termina, far away from Hyrule. Skull Kid then curses Link, forcing our hero to don the mask bearing the soul of a former Deku person. After readjusting to their new form, Link finds a familiar face. Thanks to some help from the happy masked salesman, Link makes their way to Clocktown. Once there, Link learns that in only 72 hours, the moon will crash into Termina, destroying the land with it. To stop the destruction of Termina and escape back to Hyrule, Link is tasked with recovering their Ocarina, and ultimately lifting the curse placed over Termina by the chaotic Skull Kid. Gameplay for Majora's Mask remains similar to that of Ocarina of Time. Link's expanded toolkit of masks gave players plenty of new toys to mess around with, both in and out of combat. The adventure, however, was significantly smaller in scope than its predecessor. While Ocarina of Time featured 9 dungeons, with 3 mini-dungeons spread throughout the adventure, Majora's Mask offered up only 4 main dungeons, with 4 smaller dungeons being available in the title. Instead of exploring dungeons, Majora's Mask tasked the player with solving the problems the residents of Termina are experiencing. Using the Bomber's Notebook, an item exclusive to Majora's Mask, the player can track non-playable character schedules and help them out during the game's 72-hour cycle. These side quests help to not only expand Link's adventure, but helps make the world of Termina feel more grounded and realistic, as a single character side quest can take several in-game days to complete. Majora's Mask was a major critical and commercial hit, but it failed to achieve the same heights as its predecessor. Still, a total of over 3 million copies of the game were sold on the Nintendo 64, making it the 12th best-selling game on the system. Like past titles, Majora's Mask was ported to several different consoles in the years following its release. In 2003, the game was included alongside Zelda 1, 2, and Ocarina of Time in the GameCube exclusive compilation The Legend of Zelda Collector's Edition. A few years later, in 2009, Majora's Mask was released on the Wii's Virtual Console. The title was the 300th game available through the service when it was released in May of 2009 for 1,000 Wii points. In 2016, the game was finally released on the Wii U's Virtual Console, almost 4 years after the system released, although by this point, most already had a better version of Majora's Mask to enjoy. After Ocarina of Time 3D released on the 3DS in 2011, one question was left on everyone's mind: when is Majora coming? Development of a Majora's Mask remake began shortly after Ocarina of Time 3D released, with many details of the game being kept secret during development. Nintendo executives even outright denied that the game was being worked on during some events to keep speculation down. However, after rumors and teasers, in late 2014, Nintendo announced Majora's Mask 3D for the 3DS with an intended launch date of Q1 2015. On February 14th and 15th, 2015, The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask 3D was released worldwide on the Nintendo 3DS. In North America, the game launched on the same day as the new Nintendo 3DS XL, and was used heavily in the system's promotions to show off the improvements to both Majora's Mask and the new 3DS model. A special edition, new 3DS XL, featuring Majora's Mask was available on the same day, although in very limited quantities. Different special editions were available in various regions as well, with North America getting a Skull Kid statue with the game. General quality of life improvements were made for the 3DS version, with the team at Grezzo and producer Eiji Aonuma trying to keep the game as close to the original as possible. A stable frame rate, gyro and touchscreen controls, and stereoscopic 3D were the biggest selling points for the adventure. Additional Ocarina tunes, an improved Bomber's Notebook, and reworked controls for various mask transformations made Majora's Mask 3D the definitive version of an already beloved game. Critical reception for Grezzo's remake was positive, and fans quickly flocked to retailers to purchase the title. With over 3 million copies sold worldwide, Majora's Mask 3D sold almost as many copies as the Nintendo 64 original, although it failed to meet the same level of success as Ocarina of Time 3D. Finally, in September 2021, Majora's Mask was announced for Nintendo's latest console, the Nintendo Switch. As part of the Nintendo Switch Online expansion, Majora's Mask release on the service is slated for the near future, although Nintendo has yet to clarify when the game will be coming out. In the years since its original release, the reception for Majora's Mask has only grown more positive. Many love the darker tones of the game, and the vast cast of characters that inhabit Termina. This darker tone has helped create an eeriness to Majora's Mask that has led some people to analyzing the game's many quirks to try and learn more about the characters and world that this game takes place in. Even in the speedrunning community, Majora's Mask remains popular, with new strategies and techniques being discovered to this very day. For myself, Majora's Mask was the final 3D Zelda I tackled when it came to the 3DS in 2015. I fell in love with the game like so many others and played through the entire adventure in only a few days. It's unlike any other Zelda game out there, and while it isn't my favorite of Link's Quest, it still ranks highly among my favorite Zelda games. More importantly, however, Majora's Mask began a new era of the Zelda series. After 5 entries, heralded by the legendary Shigeru Miyamoto, Eiji Aonuma and his team stepped up to create one of the best games on the Nintendo 64. Majora's Mask truly brought an end to the Miyamoto era of Zelda, and began the Aonuma era of the series. And as the series continued, Aonuma's influence would only grow stronger with each game released. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked it, be sure to leave a like and share this video on your favorite social media sites. In the comments below, I want to know your thoughts on Majora's Mask. Is it one of your favorites in the series, or do you not like the time mechanics either? Be sure to subscribe to catch the next episode when it comes out next week. In the next part, we'll be taking a look at the first and only dual release in the series with The Legend of Zelda, Oracle of Ages, and Oracle of Seasons.